So our next speaker this afternoon is Art Fortini. And Art started off as a rock climber and went over to the dark side, literally, in 1984 when he went on his first wild caving trip with the Philly Grotto. His first Lechuguilla expedition was in 1988, and he's been a regular in Lech ever since. When he's not underground, he's a member of the Sierra Madre search and rescue team, and for his day job, he builds rocket engines.
Okay, so the first area we're going to talk about is the Promised Land, which is an area way out at the far end of the western borehole. Out in this area here. And this was discovered way back when on a learn expedition that John Lyles had mentioned earlier, back when Zanzibar and Northern Exposure were discovered. We were on a trip through or into that area, and we found a room called Christmas in August, which is a fairly large room. It's about 100 feet long, and it's covered wall to wall, floor to ceiling with corrosion residue, which is sticky, gloppy stuff that once you get it on you, it's not coming off. And because we were in a room full of breakdown and required a lot of crawling and climbing, it was full contact caving. So when you're covered with material that looks like this and going into an area that looks like this, it does present some logistical challenges. So being conservation minded, we did what any sane caver would do. We meticulously cleaned off our helmet, our headlamp, and some basic surveying gear, and we stripped down and we went caving. And unfortunately, we were only able to survey a small portion of the area of the cave, or that particular room called the Nativity Chamber, because we were caving in essentially our stocking feet, and there was quite a bit of popcorn on the floor. We also encountered quite a bit of water, which at the time, the Park Service edict was, "Thou shalt not cross water." We call this area the Nativity Chamber because of this formation that looked like a mother holding a baby. So this is the original sketch map. I think somebody else actually showed this earlier today, showing Zanzibar Northern Exposure. This is Christmas in August. And this area here is the Nativity Chamber. And you see that most of it is dotted in because we only surveyed this very little bit here at the very entrance to the room. We were unable to cross the room because of A, the water, and B, we didn't have any clean gear with us. And this was back in the day when, if you encountered a clean area, you would put on aqua socks, but the rest of your clothing for the most part would remain dirty. And we didn't want to go traipsing through that room with dirty gear and drop mud and whatnot onto the flowstone floor, the ragonite bushes, the secondary calcite, and so on and so forth. So we notified the cave of what we had found when we exited, and they decided, okay, well, the smart thing to do here would be to hold off on taking the direct approach into that room and see if we could find an alternative way to get past this pretty area here. We could see black in the background. See if there's a way to get past this pretty area and find a way around it through other passage. So essentially, we were looking for a back door. So this was the expedition where we discovered the Nativity Chamber. And on the next expedition, some additional areas were found, but nothing got us past the Nativity Chamber or even into it. Next trip, again, nothing. And then after that, this is the end of 1999, expeditions in Lechuguilla were put on hold because the Park Service was going to replace the culvert. And that shut down exploration for about a year. But the new culvert is much, much nicer than the old one. And then exploration started up again in that area. And again, some new passage was found in the general area. This is in Christmas in August, but nothing that led to the Nativity Chamber or the area behind it. So finally, in 2003, the Park Service gave us permission to go in with a small expedition. There were just 4 of us, myself, Daniel Chailloux, and Kathy Boer and Ron Miller. And so we did a lot of thinking before going into the cave, before actually putting in the permit, about how we could explore this area that's beautiful and pristine while going through cave passage that looks like this. And what we finally down selected was to bring changes of clothing with us. So we would go out to the area, leave camp in dirty mode, go all the way to Christmas in August. And then in Christmas in August, we would change clothes. Now, because Christmas in August was a breakdown room and it was completely covered with corrosion residue, there were very limited options in terms of where you could change. So we had one rock right here that was reasonably large, but it only enabled one person at a time to change. So you get back there with a 4-person expedition and 3 people would be standing around getting impatient while one person was trying to change clothes as quickly as they could. And I should mention that the rock was A, covered with corrosion residue, and B, sloping. So it made it very awkward even for the one person who had dedicated use of that rock. So some of the logistical challenges were, in addition to only one person being able to change at a time, further on in the promised land, as we discovered on a couple of days later, is that it converts back from beautiful pristine mode to dirty mode caving again. So we had to bring another change of clothes with us through the clean area. Also, these trips tended to get quite long. The one-way commute time from Deep Sea's camp out to the Nativity Chamber was about 5 hours. So days, and by day here I mean a full sleep-wake cycle, were on the order of 30 hours long. And they were limited by logistics. How much food and water could you bring with you? How much pee bottle capacity could you fit into your day pack? On most trips on the way back to camp, we were sharing pee bottles because we were just running out of everything. But once you were back in the area there, it was well worth it. Lots and lots of formations. So stalactites and soda straws galore, some trays and the obligatory aragonite bushes beneath, some aragonite bushes with secondary calcite forming on them. This soda straw was about 6 feet long and it was covered from top to tip with microhalactites. And it's just little things like this, you know, I find them very impressive. And here we have Kathy admiring some soda straws. And one of the things that made these trips mentally fatiguing, not just physically, was that we always had to be careful of where we stepped. Most of the time in the Nativity Chamber and Eden, which is the room right beyond it, you're walking on flowstone. But every now and then you'd look down at the floor and see that somebody was tracking corrosion residue on the boot or on their aqua socks. We were doing all this in aqua socks. And so we'd all stop where we were, check our feet, and invariably somebody would be the lucky winner and find a little bit of schmutz on their aqua sock. And we'd all stop and clean it as well as doing some resto work. But this is kind of what we were up against, where the floor is covered with flowstone and the ceiling is covered with corrosion residue. And Murphy's Law tells you that, you know, over the course of a few millennia, some of this is going to end up down here. And if you're not constantly paying attention to where you're putting your feet, you're going to step in it. And this was back before the days of the laser rangefinders and distos. So we had to pull a nylon tape across everything, which made it all the more important to be very, very careful of where you were walking and what you were letting the tape touch. Some areas we had to do a little bit of dancing to get around some prettiness. Here we have some aragonite bushes that are slowly being consumed by some flowing flowstone. Here we have some pool fingers. These are calcified bacterial strands. And according to the biologists, finding pool fingers this large is quite unusual. On that expedition where there were just 4 of us in the cave, on our way back to camp one night, Kathy took a fall, and way out here in Keel Hall, she broke her elbow. Now, to her credit, she was able to make it back to camp under her own steam. You know, we carried some of the stuff out of her pack, but by and large, she was a trooper. And then the next day, again, under her own steam, she was able to make it out of the cave and out to the entrance. So this is our shot when we finally got back to the hut. But while we were exiting the cave, a funny thing happened in the Colorado room, and I'm going to let Ron Miller pick up the story here. Ron? Okay, well, we'll come back to this when Ron figures out how to unmute his mic. But suffice to say that we did go back to the area to continue exploring this on a subsequent expedition. And we had additional cavers with us on the subsequent trips. One of the cavers was Peter Bosted, whom I'm sure most of you not only know by reputation, but have probably caved with him. And he is a photographer par excellence. And one of the things that really opened my eyes was his ability to take a picture of something and just really control what you see. So this formation and the three images that follow are all the same formation, but just by controlling the light and the depth of view and everything else that photographers who know what they're doing can do, he makes it look like four different formations. And when you see somebody who could take an ordinary camera and do stuff like that with it and really know how to work it, I just find that very impressive. So back to the Promised Land, we have the standard formations, the columns, stalactites, stalagmites, some very long soda straws, a healthy amount of bacon, some more ginormous pool fingers with Kathy taking a good close look at them. Kathy being flanked by several soda straw columns. By the time the exploration of the Promised Land was complete, the total footage of the Promised Land, including the Zanzibar Northern Exposure parts that were part of the Learn expedition initially, totaled out to just a little over 2 miles, about 2.125 miles. And this is a map that Rob and Barbara put together after all was said and done. Up here is the Nativity Chamber. This is the entrance to it, and the area shown with white floor is where it's calcite, so nice and clean. Where it's brown, that's floor that's mostly corrosion residue. Then it gets light again, then it gets dark again, then it gets light again, then it gets dark again. So there were a lot of close changes that had to take place in order to explore the area and do it without adversely impacting the cave. This slide I shamelessly stole from a Stan Allison presentation that he gave way back when this exploration was going on. And a lot of the lessons here that we learned back then are just as applicable today as they were back at the 100-mile mark. Slow and careful exploration is far less impactful to the cave than a lemming run. Small group of area with a sense of stewardship and a plan makes a big difference in reducing impact. If you could find a way around the delicate area, by all means, it's definitely worthwhile to spend some time trying to do that. Multiple close changes in footwear transitions definitely reduced impact. Had we not done that, there would be buffalo paths through the Nativity Chamber and Eden and all the other nice areas out in that area. And one of the other things we learned was that PVC packs worked a lot better than the Cordura packs in transitioning from dirty mode to clean mode, because the PVC packs, you could effectively wipe them off. So the people that actually had made it into the Promised Land and helped with the cartography are shown here. And I'm a point and shoot kind of guy, but Danielle, Ron, and Peter Bosted, they're the real photographers that took the good photographs of that area back there. So shifting gears, the next area we're going to talk about is Never Never Land. And this is an area that's pretty much directly above Fubar, so it's not too far from camp. You go from Deep Seas Camp to the ABC's room, take a quick left and climb the first rope that you get to, and you're pretty much there. Now, this saga started back in 1993, where some explorers were out in the Red Sea area, and they did a climb up to an area called Pool Hall. And subsequent explorers did a climb out of Pool Hall up to the treehouse level. And then some more explorers did another climb out of there. And these are both pretty bold climbs up to Neverland. And then in 2002, I was part of an expedition going out to the western branch of the cave. And we were going to be pushing some climbing leads. And as we were getting ready to enter the cave, Stan Allison says, oh, by the way, since you're going to be going in with climbing gear, there's a climbing lead up above a series of ropes out of Fubar that we'd like you to go take a look at. And this area was a closed section of the cave. So when the cave technician singles you out to do him a favor and go through a closed area of the cave, you don't say no. But unfortunately, we didn't vet this particular lead. And that was a shortcoming on our part. So we climbed roughly 400 feet of rope to get up to this area of the cave. So this one is climbing out of foo bar, and here we're going up the next pitch, and here we are in Pool Hall. Pool Hall is a very pretty area because, well, it's got pools. So here we see some chenille spar, close up of that. Some subaqueous helictites. And as people have mentioned, these are extraordinarily rare outside of Lechuguilla Cave. The next pitch heading up to Treehouse. And then the next pitch that takes you up to Neverland. And then finally, we got up to Neverland, which is this area here. And one of the things that caught us by surprise was that the entire room is encircled by an overhang that's anywhere from 15 to 20 horizontal feet. And it completely encircles the room. So we looked at this and we realized, oh, geez, we had been sandbagged thoroughly. But the seeds were planted. So this was back in 93, I believe. Many, many years later, we went back, and it was in 2013 that we got a permit to go up there and attempt the climb. So in 2012, we were able to make a day trip up here. Myself, Ron Miller, and Kathy Boer went up here and scoped out the climb and put together a very, very detailed plan in terms of where the route would go and how we would avoid the various obstacles along the way. So in 2013, we got a permit to go in for a climbing expedition, and we went in loaded for bear. James Hunter mentioned that he got his climbing kit down to about 12 pounds. We were nowhere near that on this expedition, sad to say. Some of the logistical challenge, and this is a repeat of what happens elsewhere. It's mostly clean mode caving to get up to Neverland, which is where the base of the climb is. But there are some grimy areas that you encounter while you're on ropes. So you have to be very, very careful. And of course, while you're dangling from a rope and rubbing up against the wall, you really have limited mobility. It takes about 500 feet of rope work to get to Neverland. And climbing a rope, that much rope in aqua socks, is something that you're not likely to forget in the near future. Once we actually started doing the aid climb to get from Neverland to this big lead up above, we had the lead climber wear boots, and that was just a safety issue. But we did deploy a tarp below the lead climber so that if any debris fell off of his boots or from the climb itself, that we would catch that and protect the flowstone that was below him. Getting up to the lead rope, though, the lead climber would be wearing aqua socks. So essentially that's a change of footwear while on rope. So the first part of the climb involved use of a slingshot. This is a technique that I had used elsewhere, and John Lyles had independently invented it. And I don't know if it's because I had the lowest body mass or the lowest IQ, but I got elected to go up the rope first once we got it over a small, probably a 6-inch stalagmite up on the lip here. We bounce tested it 6 ways from Sunday, felt reasonably comfortable that it would hold body weight. And I very, very carefully climbed up and got to the top. And thankfully, there was opportunity for gear placements right in front of me as I got to the top there. And so that enabled the climb to go according to plan. The belayers definitely are the unsung heroes of the climbing community. Our belayer here, he was just a champion, never complained. But one of the things that would always happen to the belayer is that they would get cold. There was good air movement up here. It's a wet area of the cave, so that puts a little bit of chill into you. And you're sitting on a cold, wet rock the whole time. And for safety reasons, we always went up there with at least 3 people. So we had the climber, we had the belayer, and then we had one person up there for safety reasons. And the safety person would be wandering around with the camera, just taking pictures of things and moving around just to stay warm. So these are the fruits of the person wandering around to stay warm. So quite a few helictites in the flowstone down below where the belayer would be perched. And this is either myself or Ron Miller. We were the 2 climbers that worked the problem. These are us working our way across the ceiling. And the ceiling is pretty much dead horizontal. So it required some very delicate work to avoid some bacon and some nascent soda straws along the way. We also had to do quite a long traverse just to get to that area of the climb to avoid some other formations. The non-climber staying warm and photographing some more helictites. This is Ron on his way up to take his turn in the barrel. And you can see we have a variety of ropes involved here. So we have the belay line, we have a fixed line, and then we have a working rope. And here's the tarp that we would deploy. So Ron got up to this area, changed footwear, left his aqua socks behind. He's now in boots, but for the most part, he's in clean mode for the actual lead climbing. And a few more pretties up in Neverland. And this is, I don't know if it's Ron turning the corner or me placing the final bolt, but at the end of our 6-day expedition out here, Ron was able to make a blind hook move around the corner, which enabled him to place a small aid bolt. Then I went up after him, placed 2 real bolts, and that was the end of our 6 days. So unlike all of James Hunter's expeditions where he tops out the climb in 6 days, we got past the crux in 6 days, but we did not top out the climb. So we had to go back. So it took 3 years before we got another permit to go back into the cave. And this time it only took us a couple of days to get to the top. So the climbing route took us up here past these twin formations, across this ledge, and then up past this roof. And then from here to the top was 30 feet of, we call it easy climb because it was dead vertical and not horrifically overhung. Our belayers learned a lesson. Rather than shorts and a t-shirt, they now have long pants, long sleeve shirt, and a balaclava, and a foam pad to sit on. And on, I believe it was day 3, Ron topped out the climb. So success. So after he called off belay and told us that the passage went, he put me on belay and I cleaned all of the gear off the route. The only thing that remained were the 2 wedge anchors that we fixed at the very end of the previous expedition. All the other climbing hardware had been removed from the climb. And here's the obligatory hero shot with blackness in the background, which is one of my favorite formations. And here's Kathy taking the easy way up. Once Ron and I got to the top, I trailed a rope with me and we set a fixed line. And you can see Kathy's in clean mode here wearing aqua socks. And this is the sort of stuff that we found at the top. Some beautiful soda straws coming out of 2 central areas. And the color you see there is real. It was just very, very beautiful. For the most part, the area that we're going to be exploring proved to be mostly corrosion residue. So once more, after doing a whole lot of rope climbing in clean mode, you get to the top, and now it's time to change into dirty mode. And this is pretty representative of the type of passage that we were in. So wall-to-wall, floor-to-ceiling corrosion residue with some secondary calcite and gypsum. This is kind of a cool picture. I think Peter Bosted took this one, where it's a soda straw skewering cave raft. This is one of the few areas of Never Never Land where a caver could actually stand up straight and straighten out their back and neck. For the most part, you're caving either like this or either more hunched over or crawling. The general character of the passage up here was Pancake Passage. Kathy demonstrating the use of aqua socks for the final 70 feet. And some of the logistical challenges on this one, you're doing the climb from Foo Bar all the way up to Never Never Land, so about 500 feet of rope work in clean mode. Never Never Land, once you get there, is full contact dirty mode, so it required changing clothes at the top of the rope while still clipped into the rope.
Quick time check, you have 5 minutes remaining.
Okay, thank you. So that was a little bit of a logistical challenge. Here we were able to deploy a couple of tarps. So now we could have not just one person changing at a time, but 1.5 people. We're still kind of cramped for space. But tarps were absolutely worth their weight in gold in terms of keeping clean areas clean and not letting the dirty area encroach upon the clean stuff. So here we have some trays and some gypsum, and there's the obligatory aragonite bush down in the hole in the gypsum that you can't really see. This is what the overhang looked like right at the top where we got off rope. Some frost work. Calcified river. There are actually 3 calcified rivers up in Never Never Land. Yes, I was holding the camera straight when this picture was taken. These soda straws got tipped somewhere along the geological timeline. Some of the soda straws got corroded. This soda straw has a nice dog leg in it. This is pretty typical of the area that we were working in. And as Murphy would have it, after you're in full contact dirty mode, a clean area was found that needed to be explored. So this involved taking all of your dirty clothes, sticking them inside a clean pack, traveling in dirty mode to the clean area, deploying a tarp, taking your clean clothes out of your dirty pack, going into clean mode, and then exploring the clean area. And then when you were done with that, doing all of it in reverse and going back into dirty mode. Another calcite river. For scale, this is about 1 meter tall and 1 meter wide. Stalagmite with some secondary formations on it. Ron and Kathy doing mineral inventory and deciding which way to push the survey. And this was the last shot on our the first expedition where we had topped out. So ECR 80 was our last station. This is Kathy just taking a breather out there. In terms of where the passage ended up taking us, this is the western borehole out here. This is Promised Land that we spoke about before. Deep Seas Camp is right about here. So we're going to zoom in on this area. Never Never Land, as you can mention, is well above the western borehole, but pretty much is directly above the western borehole and parallels it. Off to the side here is Oz, which James Hunter described in the previous talk. Looking at it in profile, you can see that we're both on the same level. And after we went back to Never Never Land on a few more expeditions and did some mop up, it became apparent that these two areas were getting very, very close to each other. When we mapped it out in compass, turns out we were less than 35 feet apart from known passage in Oz. So we sent a very, very small crew out there, myself, Jen Hopper, and Kathy Borer. And if you know the three of us, I'm by far the biggest of that group. And we went back there determined to make the connection, but no such luck. So this is the profile view of Never Never Land. And this is the Other Bear, which is the climb that got us up there. And this is the plan view of it. Total surveyed passage starting at the base of the climb was 2 miles, 0.02, so 2.02 miles. Some more of the lessons learned. Close changes can be very time consuming and quite honestly frustrating because you want to go caving. But if you want to protect the cave, it's extraordinarily effective and patience is definitely a virtue. And tarps are worth their weight in gold when you're doing this sort of thing. Having dedicated clean packs and dirty packs was very, very, very helpful. When you're on long trips, and this is more a Promised Land lesson learned, if you're doing 30-hour trips, your circadian rhythm is going to go right out the window and stay that way for quite a while. And Lechuguilla is an amazing cave that we need to take care of. And here are the photo credits, and I will end it there.